The Canadian press is abuzz today with sequester, doom, and gloom. The CBC says cuts will be $1.2 trillion over 8 years. That's an accounting fiction. There's going to be a new Congress in 2014 and a new president in 2016. So any projections about spending in 2017, 4 years from now, or even 2014 are meaningless. The budget's redrawn every year, and a promise from a politician is worthless at the best of times, but 8 years in the future when they're not even going to be in power, it's just completely irrelevant. All you can look at is this year, which is $84 billion, which when you look at the scope of the federal budget, which is over $3 trillion, you see that this is a lot of hysteria over basically nothing. It's also dishonest to call these reductions in the amount that spending is going to increase as cuts. They're not cuts. A cut would be if total government spending decreased. It's never going to happen. It's a typical tactic of bureaucrats that any reduction in spending increase that's forced upon them by fed-up taxpayers is going to be accompanied by cuts which are most injurious to the consumer. They don't design the cuts to eliminate the least important thing. Like if you had to do a cut in your family budget, you would stop spending money on what you view to be the least important thing, the most frivolous thing. They do the exact opposite. They cut spending on the most important things because they know this is going to hurt people, and so people don't want to be hurt, so they're going to say, well, these spending cuts are hurting us, and so then they're going to say, well, let's get more spending for this bureaucrat. So they like to hold the public hostage in that manner. Hence the threat by Janet Napolitano to inconvenience those crossing the borders by reducing the number of agents there and thereby increasing wait times. It's important to understand that this problem of border crossing delays is entirely the product of the state. There's simply no need to restrict the flow of labor or capital, that is the movement of Americans and Canadians and their property between Canada and the United States. The entire border is unnecessary. There need not be any delays or hassles at all. You should be able to just drive from Niagara Falls to Niagara Falls. The fault of the inconvenience existing already is clearly the fault of the government. They're going to make it worse in order to punish Joe taxpayer, in order to make sure their own revenues and powers are not in any way diminished. Reductions in the rate of spending increase will benefit the U.S. economy. Well, news articles by the CBC and the CTV parrot the White House line on sequester panic over the seen, that is the oh-so-visible reductions in government spending. What they do not mention is the unseen. For, of course, government expenditures do not come from out of the sky, but they must first be coerced from the hapless taxpayer. If the amount of money extorted from Joe Public is reduced, or rather, if the increase in the amount of money extorted from Joe Public is reduced, as there is certainly no talk, as I said earlier, of a total reduction in government expenditures, nor will there be, then that must mean there are more resources available for spending by private individuals on both consumer and capital goods. That means a higher standard of living for the consumer and a healthier economy, a more productive economy in the long term. Government spending, often viewed by establishment economists as a panacea, is actually a dead weight on the economy. Confiscatory tax rates make it more difficult for savers to save, especially those on the margin. And savings is really the key to long-term economic growth because investment channels those savings into capital, capital being non-human, non-natural factors of production, like a factory, for example, a computer. Government spending is a dead weight on the economy. The more money the government spends on bonds, the ridiculous salaries of bureaucrats, programs not to pay farmers not to grow crops, and everything else, the less wealth exists in the productive private sector. This means less capital, lower, and therefore lower productivity for workers, which means lower wages, less wealth produced, in general lower standards of living because there is less capital accumulated, but also specifically much lower standards of living for those who create wealth, basically everybody who's got a real job, not some government paycheck. Since on the market, they would, of course, keep every dollar they earned instead of being forced to hand over half the fruits of their productive efforts to the state. In short, Canadians will benefit from the cuts or the reductions in the increases. And anytime you reduce government spending, that's great for the economy. So what we should do here, instead of getting into a panic over the fact that there's going to be this sequester, is we should demand that taxes and spending be decreased here in Canada, and that's how we're going to have long-term economic growth. Not government spending, not more regulations, not more bureaucrats, but cuts in spending and taxes here in Canada.